Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us for Worship and Word Conversations. We have been hanging out with our Worship and Word community for what has it been 2 months now since we've been quarantined, and these Sabbath afternoon conversations have been just really enlightening and encouraging. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today for this topic, the things that really your pastor wish they could tell you. So I know it's going to be an incredible conversation today. If you've been with us on Worship and Word before, you already know what to do. I see you checking in already in the comment section. We have so much fun in the comment section this when we wrestle with these topics. And if you have questions or comments of your own, feel free to share those in the comment section. I've also asked people to shout out their pastor or tag your pastor specifically so they'll get the notification that we're having this conversation. We already got the Byron and Pam from Waldorf, Maryland checking in, Jennifer from Montclair, New Jersey, Johnny and Siobhan Jakes from Waldorf, Maryland, our friend Carlos from Berea Church in Boston. So I know you guys are coming in and getting comfortable. Maybe some of you are taking notes or getting prepared. Feel free to hit share. I don't know if you're watching this on YouTube or on Facebook. If you're watching it on Facebook, feel free to hit share so that other people can know that we're having this conversation as well. We know this is going to be a power-packed hour that we spend together. We're going to keep it tight to an hour. We're going to try really, 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 really hard. We're going to try to get warm and going really, really quickly. And I know some of you will have questions as well. And we'll try to wrestle with as many questions as we can before time runs out. So on this particular conversation, what your pastors wish you knew, I am joined by, I don't have enough vocabulary. They do. I don't have enough vocabulary to explain just the magnitude of the impact that these two gentlemen have had just on the church and on the ministry and on pastors far and wide internationally, and I'm grateful that they're joining us for this conversation today. I want to start off first by introducing I'm going to let him introduce himself. My friend Jason, man, give us a little bit about you, man. Tell the people a little bit about you and where you are. You've been here before. You're no stranger to Worship and Word, but for those of us who haven't been introduced to you before, give us a little bit about you.
Hello, my name is Jason. I'm a pastor in the Netherlands. I'm a pastor of 4 churches, great churches. I met Pierre and Andrews. I'm the husband of 1 wife, father of 2 daughters, and I'm good. I'm real happy about that. I'm very content.
Jason, in a couple days, how many days?
Tuesday.
Tuesday. We will have to put that prefix on your title. You'll be doctor. That's why I put it on the flyer already.
Right.
It will be conferred. Everything is completed. All the requirements are completed, but it will be conferred on you.
Right.
Dr. Jason O'Rourke. Tell us what's your doctorate in? What was your study, your emphasis?
My doctorate is in spiritual and strategic leadership. My project, the topic of my project is titled "Toward a Seventh-day Adventist." What is Seventh-day Adventist? Biblical. Okay, there we. I had to think about it. Toward a Seventh-day Adventist biblical theology of prophetic social engagement, and then there's a colon: social justice and social righteousness. That was my thesis, my project. I wanted to see for myself what a social engaging theology from the Bible would look like as an Adventist, how I would build one. And so that's what I did.
Yeah, Jerome Skinner, Dr. Jerome Skinner.
I just want to address Dr. Jerome Skinner real
Dr.
quick.
Jerome Skinner.
Dr. Jerome Skinner, the guy, you're a beast, sir. My hair is off to you, sir.
We've had Dr. Jerome Skinner on before in our conversation on how to read the Bible, and he says, "Congratulations, Jason." Now, listen, there's another tier. Like we have tiers, not really, but for the sake of this conversation, we have tiers of guests. All right, so you got the host that's down here. You got Dr. Jason O'Rourke, but then you have like just a totally different level of, I don't even know how to completely explain it, but I thank you so much, sir. I'm grateful that you're joining us. Allow you to introduce yourself to the people. We know him lovingly as Dr. said, like legendary, north, south, east, and west. Legendary Dr. Said has trained pastors and leaders, has pastored churches. Man, a wealth of knowledge and experience. Dr. Said, give us an introduction. Doc, tell us a little bit about you and your work.
Well, my name is David, and I'm a broken person in the process of healing. That's probably the best thing I can say about myself. I mean, by profession, I'm a social worker. I've been a pastor, a chaplain, still am a chaplain as well. But I'm a professor of family ministry and discipleship at the Seventh-day Adventist Theological Seminary. And I was privileged to be able to help develop the master's degree in social work, dual degree with the master's in divinity, because we saw that many pastors needed to be equipped to deal with the real life issues that they're going to face when they go out into ministry. And we thought that social work added to a theological training would be a good fit.
So,
I'm married to
yeah, I
Beverly.
was gonna ask.
Yeah. Married to Beverly. Um, Between us, we have 5 children and 12 grandchildren and 1 great-grandchild. And so that's another whole story for another whole day. But that's, that's my background.
Dr. Said, tell us a little bit about the ministry that we affectionately call your wife Auntie Bev, the ministry that you two have together. I know we've had you guys have been with us when I pastored in Bowling Green, Kentucky. We had a great
Mhm.
time there. You work with Jason and his ministry. Tell us a little bit about that ministry.
Well, the name of the ministry is Into His Rest Ministries. And we do a number of things through the ministry. We do speaking engagements at churches, and we do couples retreats, marriage retreats. We've done a certain amount of writing. We've written a book called Cleansing the Sanctuary of the Heart: Tools for Emotional Healing. And I just finished a book that is at the publisher on human sexuality, Christian sexuality, similar to my friend Jason. He has a great book on that as well. And um, so I mean, it's counseling, it's working with people, it's a transformational ministry that's designed to get concepts from the head to the heart, to get them integrated and to really change lives, so that we're not just a cognitive bunch, but we really are integrated between our left and right brains, our linear logical self and our affective feeling experiential selves.
I know so many of you are intrigued even by listening to Dr. Said for a few minutes. I'll make sure to take some time and put links in the comment section so that you can follow up on him and his work and his ministry with well, I call her Auntie Bev. Today's conversation is about, man, it's about things that your pastor wished that he or she could tell you. And this is a weighty conversation for me. I know it is for you two as well. Having experienced the pastoral ministry for 7 years, and it's just a lot. And there were some things that when I started as a pastor, that's almost very quickly the veneer came off from seminary graduation to installation in the following week. It was
Literally.
almost like like the the wrapping paper and the glitter and the confetti of what I had pictured in my mind the pastorate was going to be was radically shifted. And I want to start with you, Dr. Said, and talk about your pastoral experience. Like how did you end up there, and what was that journey like for you?
Well, Beverly and I had a ministry in rural Ohio, northeastern corner of Ohio, and we were a part of a local church. And when our previous pastor, who was a bivocational pastor left, the church members requested that I take on that role of becoming the pastor of the church. And so I was humbled to be asked to be the pastor of the Ashtabula Seventh-day Adventist Church, hired by the Ohio Conference. And so, yeah, that was a very growth-filled experience for me, I must say.
I like how you put that.
Yeah, I can remember that there were people who really loved me and were rah, 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 and there were people who didn't, and who challenged my thinking and my ministry and my preaching and all that kind of stuff. But you know who I learned the most from? Those who didn't like me, those who challenged me. I learned a whole lot more. I grew a whole lot more from their challenges than I did from the people who were in my corner.
Mm-hmm.
It all has to do with the attitude with which you approach those who challenge you as a pastor. Whether you're going to grow from it or whether you're going to get bitter and resentful or cut them out or not want to talk to them or whatever. So, yeah, at least that was my experience.
Doc, I'm curious how long it took you to grow in that challenge with those people. I mean, when you took over, were you just naturally, hey, my name is Dr. Sedlacek, and I'm going to grow as you challenge me? I mean, is that how did that work? Did it take you some time to figure that out? How did that work?
Well, to be honest with you, Jason, I'm still growing under the challenge because I still get them even as a seminary professor. And, but, it was, I was in my 40s at the time. So I wasn't, I wasn't young. I had done some personal growth and in fact, Beverly and I were, at a point in our ministry there where people were coming to stay with us from all over the place, and we were kind of helping to counsel and to mentor them through a process, of broken marriages and broken lives and all that kind of stuff. So, and I had done a fair amount of my own growth work, before then, although I've done much more since, but I was already on the journey at that point. And so, but one of the things I know for me that I had always wanted to do, because I was taught as a kid that I'm supposed to be perfect, that I'm not supposed to have any flaws, that I'm supposed to present myself as if I am, and I'm not the only one. A lot of the young men and women who I train even today, come in with that illusion that they're supposed to be perfect. And so when, I wasn't, and I made mistakes and people challenged me, it didn't take long for me to figure out that, that maintaining this illusion of being perfect wasn't going to work for me, and that I had to allow myself to be human and allow other people to see me as human as a pastor. And perhaps that's one of the things that if I were to tell, pastors, please embrace your humanity, because I believe this, that the degree of your spirituality, the genuine degree of your spirituality, it can only be gauged by the degree to which you embrace your humanity. Those two have to go together. You can't be a disembodied spirit, up in the spiritual world, without embracing your humanity. And so allowing yourself to be human and to function, and your spirituality in the context of your humanity, because listen, today people need and want pastors who are real. People are broken, and they want someone who can identify with them in their brokenness rather than just kind of going to church and having this nice sermon preached at their heads, and calling it a day. People, I think, want someone to really engage their reality, engage them in their places of brokenness and vulnerability, and find Jesus there, meeting them in that place of brokenness, the same way he did when he was on earth. I mean, he spent more time with broken people, touching and healing them and drawing them to himself through touching and healing them experientially than he did preaching sermons and stuff like that. So I think the same model today would work well.
Dr. Said, let's talk about for a few minutes the tension of the brokenness, and I mean that's even how you introduce yourself, and we all resonate because all three of us have had just deep conversations about our own spiritual journeys. The brokenness that every person carries, the brokenness that's brought into even the training to be a pastor, and then the insertion into a congregation, and this call and appeal to be real. That tension versus the how do I put this, the job security that almost is counterintuitive
Yeah.
to being a real person.
That's good. That's good. That's good.
Yeah. There's a whole lot in that question. And one of the places maybe to begin unpacking that is, I ask my students in marriage family, why are you here?
Mm.
Why are you here? And most people will say, well, I feel called to be here, or I've been running from the call for a long time and I've stopped running from God, and so I'm here. And that's cool. I believe that. I believe a lot of people are called, but mixed in with that genuine call, for many people who are broken, might come, for example, a need for recognition, a need for affirmation, a need to be liked and loved, and the thinking is, well, if I'm in a pastoral position, I'm in a position where, I'm up front and I can preach and I can do this and people will notice me and, and then I'll get the affirmation that maybe I never got as a little boy or girl. Maybe I can get it from them. And so a part of what we try to do is help people, what I call differentiate, while they're in training in the seminary. And what that means is develop a solid sense of who I am, my identity. Okay, it can't be based on whether you, as my congregation, like me or don't like me, or like what I say or don't like what I say. It has to be because I know who I am and I know whose I am and I know the call he has on my life, and I'm going to be obedient to whatever the Holy Spirit tells me to say, rather than what I think you want to hear, or whether what I say will make you like me because it's original and the kind of preaching that really gets to you and you say amen or whatever, all that kind of stuff that we do. And so, but to get to that place, we really have to embrace our brokenness, because a lot of us came from families where we didn't come away from that experience with what we might call secure attachment, where I had stable parents who were there with me and loved me, and I knew that they loved me and they had my back. And a lot of children, pastors, come away from their childhood experience with anxiety and fear that I'm not going to measure up, if or I'm not going to be enough or whatever. And so when we know where people start with and where we want them to end up before they leave the seminary, at least fairly solid in their sense of identity, that they're not borrowing their sense of self from what other people think of them. But that question has been, fairly solidly settled. Then we know that they have to go on a journey from where they are to where they need to be. And And so those of you who've taken my marriage and family class know that one of the very first assignments I give is to write out your own story.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you? Where did you come from? What kind of hurts and wounds did you experience in life? What kind of blessings too, not just bad, but good. And then how did you respond to that? How have you survived it? What kind of thinking did you come away with about yourself or about God? Because often the way we relate to God, really, our capacity to trust God often relates to how could we trust our dad or how could we trust our mom, and we often then transpose that onto God, for better or for worse. And so embracing your story is where it starts. And then how can we then encounter God in our places of brokenness so that we can know, not just know about, but know deep within us that God is for us, that God loves us with an everlasting love, that just as he told Jesus, this is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased, that we can know I am his beloved son or daughter also in whom he's well pleased. And that doesn't depend on my behavior or how well I function. It's just because I'm his daughter or I'm his son. To me, it's really interesting. Jesus' baptism is recorded in Mark chapter 3. But right after that, in chapter 4, he was taken by the Spirit into the wilderness. His sense of identity, his father said, this is my beloved son in whom I well pleased. He hadn't done any ministry yet at all. He just was. But the temptations, check out the temptations. If you are the Son of God, then do something. Turn the stone into bread. Prove it. And how many of us fall into that trap? God tells us your identity is in me, you're my child. But we've been taught we have to prove our value and worth. And Satan gets us right there. You got to prove it by doing this thing, and he gets us the same way. He gets us the same way.
Doc, what I'm hearing, we have the call is and we have put the doing before the being.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Which I have to admit, I've done it. I was trained that way. Mission mindedness, and you accomplish things, and you get rewarded for what you do, and so I don't remember a lot of being courses or conversations, really. I think Dr. Walsh, Dr. Kidder at seminary are trying to aim that way.
Mm-hmm.
I think Dr. Kwesi at Oakwood, and they call it spiritual formation, but there's such a big backlash.
Yeah.
Because of the verbiage, the wording, spiritual formation, that, the attempt, quote unquote, human beingness gets lost. And people kind of, it's like, well, that's kind of weird. So let me just stay doing and I'll be all right. It's almost as if we try to back into being through doing. Am I making sense here?
You are.
Before you respond, Dr. Sid, I want to not just limit it to the seminary context. And we know from outside afterwards, when you're in the pastorate, this doing, the A, B, and C of ministry, attendance, baptism, cash, or tithe and offering. And we have so many conversations around the metric of what you've been doing, and hardly any conversations around like your own humanity and beingness, and for a lot, especially if you were talking about before, Doctor said that the triggering that can happen. I never measured up. People say I never measured up in my family, or traumatic things happened to me. There was favoritism in their family, or whatever happened, and now you're in a paradigm where you're only judged based on these sets of metrics regardless of the context in which the evaluation is occurring. And it's not just in seminary, it's in the pastorate. And how do we wrestle with, so it's easy for you, people say it's easy for you to say, Dr. Said, you don't have X person, calling you every month and saying, okay, what do your baptisms look like this month? What does your tithe and offering look like this month? Has your attendance grown? With no conversation about the other areas of life and ministry and humanity.
Yeah. That for me is a very, very sad reality. And so when I have the opportunity of speaking to conference leadership, I do without apology say, what measures of success for your pastors are you communicating? And just as you said, ABC, attendance, tithe and offering, baptisms, those kinds of things, is uniformly measures of success. Okay. And so when I have the opportunity and sometimes I get stones thrown at me, but I say this, look, what if we changed that paradigm upside down? What if we found ways of measuring success in pastoral ministry by a metric like how many people this month have you discipled into a passionate love for Jesus Christ?
Mm-hmm.
How many people, as a result of that love for Jesus and their hearts being captivated by that relational, passionate love for Jesus, have had to go out and tell somebody else about this Jesus that they have fallen in love with, because that's what you've discipled them, mentored them, facilitated them for them to have. And I, because if our goal is simple baptisms, bringing people in, I say this frankly, you're just using people.
Whoa.
You're just using people to build
is.
your numbers. You don't care about them. You just want the tithe and offerings and the numbers so you look good. And I say, let's turn that upside down. If we train people, because we first, as pastors, have fallen in love with Jesus ourselves.
Yeah.
We have a deep, intimate relationship with him ourselves that is so in love, so passionate in that way that we've been loved, that we have to tell our congregation about it, and then they go out and tell other people about it. Do you think that tithes and offerings are going to take care of themselves in attendance? I mean, you see, we have the cart before the horse, but if we put the horse first, the cart's going to take care of itself.
Oh.
And we're not going to be using people then. And people aren't going to be coming in one door and going out the other because they don't find any connections there.
My God.
And so sometimes they don't like hearing it, but that's what I think the truth is that we need to hear. We need to change our thinking and our approach in terms of ministry.
We labeled this conversation things that your pastor wish they could tell you or wished you knew. And I know we're touching on it. We're getting warm now. So those of you who are just coming in who are watching, this is the paradigm of worship and word conversations on this Saturday, on this Sabbath afternoon. Things your pastors wish you knew or wish they could tell you. And that metric rating system is a real thing, folks, that pastors can't already feel comfortable talking about. Jay.
I feel like when I hear what you're saying, and based on my own experience and et cetera, I feel like we move too fast. And what I mean by that is, I feel like evangelism is a sprint. It is the sprint, and it is the endless cycle of activity. And it is the full-on engagement, if you will. And I feel like what you're describing is a slower process, and slow is not bad because it's intentional and it births organic movement. But and it births movement in people that I don't have to be over there, because if I'm doing this has a ripple effect. You know what I'm saying? But I feel like our evangelism model is a sprint for one individual to get from A to B, instead of having a ripple effect of, okay, I'm going to love on these people, and then as I develop them, they will, and it'll ripple out. I feel like the model is moving too fast, and it's not rippling, it's individual. Does that am I making sense?
Well, you certainly are. And because I think largely our evangelism model is a cognitive model where we preach certain doctrines. The doctrines of the church, which are wonderful and foundational, but we get people to assent with their head to those 28 fundamentals and all of that. But I think when Jesus evangelized, he not only gave content, but he evangelized the heart. It was a heart transformation. And I think, Jason, by definition, that's going to be a slower process than simply like a 3-week evangelistic series where, I teach you these truths and you say, yes, I believe those things up here, but God's not gotten from here to here. And true evangelism, in my view, has to be heart evangelism. It has to. Let me say it this way: it has to be an integration of both left brain and right brain. It has to be an integration of head and heart. And when you understand the reality that Satan has done his job well to destroy and to create brokenness and dysfunction in families, he's done that well, then we have to understand that to evangelize someone's heart means to touch and heal and be equipped to represent or facilitate a process of having Jesus enter into those broken places too, so that people can be settled, that they can really trust God. And trust doesn't occur here. Trust occurs in here. And so I can assent to it, but there's a whole long distance between the head and the heart where I really, because the Bible says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Okay.
It does too.
And so evangelism, if we're going to do like an evangelism series, I think it should be integrating both cognitive and affective content in that series, but it certainly needs to be followed up with healing activities, small group ministries, or Christ-centered 12-step programs that our church has, by the way, and all kinds of other healing kinds of things for people who might need them. Ways of dealing with real family brokenness. How well are you communicating? How well are you resolving conflict? How well are you able to really listen to one another? Are you really defensible? Where'd that come from? Well, it came from when I was a kid. All this brokenness reveals itself in the way we do relationships. And listen, our churches can only be as healthy as the members that compose them. And that's why we have a lot of mess in our churches, factions and people leaving and people getting offended, because most people don't leave because of our doctrines. They leave because someone said something to them that they didn't like to hear, and relationships got broken. So they left and went somewhere else. That's the reality of what often happens, I think. So anyway, that's what I think.
I mean, it's a lot, and man, time is flying. We only have about 20 minutes left in our conversation, and I hope what we've been sharing are just casually talking about has been a blessing and provides some perspective for you who are watching as you are, observing and interacting with your pastor and maybe you have a large pastoral team, maybe it's just one, just some things for you to be aware of. Dr. Said, can we talk for a few minutes about uh, the the blessing and the burden of the giftedness that individuals bring to ministry? I was sharing this earlier. It was a book that I read by Tim Keller, maybe about 3-4 years ago. The book was titled Preaching, and I think the subtitle was Communicating in an Age of Skepticism. And Tim Keller argues in his book that uh, gifts, your spiritual gifts, can be on display and be effective even if you are spiritually immature, uh, or if your heart is far from God. And there are times where we conflate um, like deep spirituality with the measurement of a person being able to preach well or sing well or be a great administrator or be super creative. And sometimes in the pastorate, you kind of get a pass in some place even if you're not. I want to be careful on how I frame this. Um, like we see in sports sometimes, a person gets a pass for their ability on the field, irrespective of the other portions of their life, and how sometimes it's a like a cycle or a trap for leaders because we've been getting a pass simply based on our gifts for so long.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. You know, I want to begin by sharing that so many of the men and women who I have the privilege of mentoring and teaching in the seminary are truly remarkable people.
Mhm.
Absolutely remarkable, gifted, called people who love the Lord as much as they're able to with all their hearts at this moment that they're able to. You hearing what I'm saying? Okay. Honestly, they're good. They're
Mhm.
sincere. They want to, um, but um, so, but talking about a pass, you know, let me just share a couple of stories with you. You know, one young man um, that I worked with a while back was someone who really had a gift, for ministry. He was out there doing things for people, and he loved God the best he could, and all of that. But what he didn't know was his heart. That based upon his, you know, he was he had been sexually abused as a child, but he really didn't want to go there and look at that at all. And so what happened is he got into emotionally adulterous relationships. He was married and he would not look at that, and he kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And, we saw that. And despite all of his gifts, we couldn't keep him because he would not look at that, and our prayers that he will, and that he'll really be serious. And some of it was cultural because he came from a culture where it wasn't okay, to to be vulnerable and to talk about real stuff like that. You had to kind of put on this show, and so I mean, he had a double whammy where he just could not honestly embrace a journey of healing for himself. I mean, there are other people. I mean, one just more recent, a brilliant preacher. Oh my goodness, I've never heard someone. This was, he was just brilliant, and he captivated people when he was up there preaching. But his wife was almost ready to divorce him because he had this terrible problem with pornography. And he had gone to help, to get help and help and help many, many times, and was trying to go to 12-step meetings and but he had this real struggle with pornography. And, one of the things I believe, for example, in that regard is that our sexuality and our spirituality are deeply, intimately related. You can't disconnect your sexuality and your spirituality. God made us that way. And so when I work with people who struggle with things like pornography or other sexual sins, I ask them a question. I said, what were you really longing for? And you know what they tell me? Almost every time, I'm really longing for deep intimacy. And who made us for intimacy? With himself. God did.
Yeah.
But we're trying to substitute some other form of intimacy because we don't know how to have it with God yet. We don't know how that need can really get met with him. And so we find some other way of trying to get it, whether it's through a relationship with some other person, or through some sexual encounter, or through a screen where we look at, things going on there, So, yeah. So, talking about getting a pass, I want it to be as true as possible that we're genuine, but also that people understand that, look, we're human. I did a study of Seventh-day Adventist pastoral families. And, pastors many of them said, I'm lonely because I can't share with anyone in my congregation what my real struggles are.
Mm-hmm.
This is a lonely ministry. I can't have the kinds of connections with people that I really crave. And I'm so busy helping everybody that I don't even have time for my own family sometimes. And I don't have time even for vacations sometimes, to just get away from all of it. And we don't teach our pastors how to set healthy boundaries and say, wait a minute, this is my time. Reclaiming my time. I don't understand that. Jason, your hand's up. You know what I'm saying?
No, Doc, because, you were talking about this whole thing with time and, vulnerability. I understand that, and I like that. Now here it's a little bit different than there because this country is a little bit slower than America, and it gives me more time. The culture expects you to spend time with family. It's cultural here. But again, there still are a lot of demands, et cetera. How does this relate? I'm trying to make sure I ask this question right. When I am called, I think this would be a good question that I would like to know. When I am called, I am called to be. I'm not called primarily to do.
Mm-hmm.
But how do I communicate that? Because the only thing that is discussed with me is doing.
Yeah.
How do I communicate to everyone, literally in my sphere of influence, literally church members, peers, superiors, heck, for somebody it might even be their family. I'm called by God with these gifts that ain't the only ones I have, forgive the ain't, to be. Because everybody wants me to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you could help me out here.
Yeah. So one way of looking at that is when I have never been supported to have a self apart from you, a self of my own, then I get into the false thinking that selflessness is a good thing, that I have to be available 24/7, in order to meet everybody's need, because I don't have a self of my own. And without a self of my own, I don't have a capacity to set healthy boundaries and say, this is me, this is my yard, this is you and your yard. And my first responsibility is to nurture and be with myself. And so we talk about, but don't have an easy time with this. I first need to be with God. I need to just be with God.
Yeah.
Spending time with God. In my survey of pastors, that was one of the first most remarkable thing, is that between 60 and 70% said they struggle with their own spiritual life because they're busy preparing sermons. That's not for them and their own being with God. They confuse that with doing. I got to prepare the sermon. And so that's the first being. Then I need to be with my family. Okay. I need time just to be a father, to be a husband. Okay. And I need time just to be with me, and so when I do that, I can come into a place and say, I want you to know who I am, not what I do. I am a lover of God. That's my first task. And that's what's going to equip me to be able to be a conduit from God to you, is I spend time just being with God. I also want to model what healthy family life is like, because I want to show you, not just tell you what that is. I want to model it for you so that you experience that in your pastor. And that doesn't mean that we're never going to have conflicts, and we're never going to have differences, my wife and I, or my husband and I, if I'm a female pastor, or that we'll be perfect parents. But I want to show you what the journey is like, okay, and model that for you. I want to be that, with my family. So God comes first, family comes second. My congregation, as much as I love you all, you're third in the hierarchy. Okay. And so that, that implies that there may be times where you call me and you need my time, but if it's not an emergency and it's my day for my family, or it's my time with God, I might say, may I call you later? Or can I call you tomorrow? If it's not an emergency, I'll be able to establish those boundaries and not feel guilty about it. A lot of us feel guilty because we're told we're supposed to be available 24/7, or else we're not being a good pastor. And we get that message. It's like, no, when you go into a congregation, I hope, and I try to articulate this with my students, you need to be able to share that that's your reality, and that's what you're going to get if you hire me, and not be afraid, and the other thing I would say to you two and to other pastors who are listening is, when you get into that role of being in the conference office, if you do one day, listen, remember what we've said. Make a difference when you get there. Create a different paradigm when you're there. And you might even, I don't know if you have courage, articulate that even today with your conference officials. This is who I am. This is what I'm learning about what healthy pastoral ministry is. Someone has to articulate the vision for that.
Yeah, I know. And Pierre, if I'm talking
go.
But Pierre, tell me if you experienced this train of thought, right? Because I talked to somebody else. I talked to a friend of mine. This is a military train of thought. Tell me if you experienced it in the military, in pastoring. The military had a phrase when I was coming through in the Army. They said, if we wanted you to have a family, we would have issued you one. Right? That was because the motto was mission first.
Mm-hmm.
Family better be used to you being on mission. You know what I'm saying? So you deploy, you do all these other things, and the family has to kind of be able to take care of itself because you're doing the noble thing for the mission. Right? Pierre, did you experience that? And I'm not throwing anybody under the bus.
Yeah.
And then let me know. I'm not trying to.
I think there were times where I felt the distinct tension of competing agendas.
Mm-hmm.
What my employer is asking at any given time, what my congregation is, these concentric circles, what my congregation is asking, what my family is asking, and then ultimately inside of all of that, what God is asking me to do. And there have been times, now I've been in conversations with colleagues where the question was thrown out, do people even care that I have a family? Like, do we even care?
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard, very difficult to pastor effectively if, like you were saying, Doctor said, like if there's tension with my wife and with my kids, and we're trying to work through stuff, and there's no space for me to even have the conversation around, as a family, we kind of need help in this area. It's easy to get into a place, I think, where you just put all of that stuff by the wayside and you put your head down and do your work like a good pastor, so that you don't have to talk about it, because you know that there's not going to be a space where you can. And let's be honest with the three of us. There are colleagues of ours who are watching now in affirmation of a lot of things that we are saying, but they can't even put anything in the comment section.
No, they can't.
Out of fear that someone's going to screenshot it and send that to somebody else. So I know I've experienced tension both in personal life and in conversation with colleagues.
Mm-hmm. And when you layer on top of that decisions that are made to move pastors from one church to another church,
come on, Doc. Come on, Doc.
where you're not even consulted in that decision often. It's just, we're going to move you. And then, but what happens is often in those kind of situations, the pastor's spouse has begun their career or ministry in that place. And then not only are you moved, but they're moved and they're uprooted from their source of stability. And often I've heard this, that what happens is when you begin your career as a spouse and you go to a different place, the job you're able to get is not as good as the one you just had, and so you have to settle for something less because that's all you can get. And so, I mean, there really is an impact. There really is an impact, not just on the pastor himself or herself, but on the whole family, when those kinds of decisions are made.
We had a question from Jamie Pottinger. The question is, should pastors share their boundaries with their congregation? I felt like you touched on this before, but can you underscore? And if the answer is yes, what's the framework of how we walk out that conversation? And is it like a one-time thing, or is it an ongoing thing?
Well, so yes, when you interview me to come there, if you do, I want to tell you that as a part of the interview. Number two, the interview is normally just with like the board or a few people, okay. But then when I maybe do my first, second, or third sermon somewhere very early on, I want to articulate those boundaries, God first, time with God. My family is most important. My congregation is next in importance. I want to articulate that, and I want to articulate, boundaries. This is who I am. These are my strengths. These are my growth areas. This is time I need for myself, where I'm not going to be available unless it's an emergency. I want to be very open about articulating it. But thirdly, as I live that out, I'm also sending a message. I'm preaching a message when I live it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just by what I say, but by how I live. I'm actually living out the boundaries, and they're going to get the message often more clearly by what they see than necessarily by what I say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we could go. I know we could go for a little bit longer in this conversation, just kind of scratching the surface and just casually talking about some things that we've experienced. And Doctor said, I know you have stories for years about um, just your support and counseling and mentoring pastors, and we're just grateful that you took some time to have a conversation with us today. Jason, I'm grateful for you as well, helping to moderate and add to the discussion. And Doc, we got maybe 40 seconds left. Uh, can you speak to both, pastors and congregations? How can we better work together in terms of just supporting each other and doing ministry in a better way?
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to begin with this. Jason and Pierre, I love you. That's what I want to begin with. Our pastors need to hear that. They need that kind of support. Okay. Not because they're insecure in themselves, but because it's true. You know, you know, I want you to know that if you need something, Pastor, you can come to me. You can let me know what you need. That's okay. You don't have to be, super pastor for me. You can be vulnerable, and it's safe. So where are safe places for pastors? We have to create them. More and more conferences are, by the way, embracing the need for small groups for pastors to just have talks and to share with one another, without fear of it getting back to the conference, president or whatever. So some conferences are really moving in that direction, and I really, really appreciate that. But creating safe spaces, embracing our humanity, beginning a journey of healing, and having it be safe for pastors to do that. I mean, that to me would be a good start anyway.
Doctor said, we know you and Auntie Bev are extremely busy. We thank you for this hour of your time that you spent with us. We're grateful for it. I know people are asking, for part two, and I know people are going to watch the replay and even have questions. If you could, I'm gonna ask Doctor said if you could do share with us URLs, how to catch up with you. You had mentioned your ministry. If you got a website that you want to share, and then after
Mm-hmm.
that, I'm going to ask Dr. Jason to have prayer for us as we close this conversation.
Yeah.
And the name of your book, the
And
name of your book,
yeah,
sir.
yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
all of
Thank
it.
you.
Okay. The name. Let's start with that. The name of the book is Cleansing the Sanctuary of the Heart: Tools for Emotional Healing. And so it's in its third edition, and there's a workbook that goes along with it that corresponds with every chapter in the book, that gives you exercises to work on corresponding to the content in the chapter. And our ministry's website is intohisrest.com.
Okay, I'm gonna type that and make sure it's in there. Intohisrest.com.
Yes, sir.
Intohisrest.com. Okay, Dr. Jason, if you could have prayer for us, as we thank you guys for hanging out with us this afternoon. It's been a refreshing and enlightening, even difficult conversation, but we think that we're better for it. And We know your pastors will be better for it as well.
Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you for this time that we can talk about just being human. We thank you, God, that the people you have set to minister over us are not demigods, but they are humans. Father, help us to allow them to be humans. Help us to create safe spaces for their humanity, even as you came into our humanity and into our weakness and ministered to humanity. Bless Dr. Said as bless him and Auntie Bev as they continue to minister. Thank you for their ministry. Thank you for Pierre and everything that you have blessed him with the worship and the word and the way he's just facilitating and getting people the information and the skills they need. Thank you, God. Bless these two men and their ministry. Bless our families, God. Bless those watching, especially those pastors, God, who are still hurting. You can bring healing. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
And amen. Before I end the broadcast, there was a question, Doc, when is the new book coming out? You said it was at the publisher.
And I didn't get a name.
And we didn't get a name. And then Dr. Jason, we want to hear about your book as well. We want to make sure people get that information before I take us off live.
The two questions you asked, the answer is I don't know.
You don't know the name of your book?
Well,
it goes like that sometimes.
It's, we're negotiating that. One suggestion that the publisher gave me was Between the Sheets. So I don't know how well that'll fly or not. But the other thing is there's some content which the publisher's having to think long and hard about before they decide if they want to keep it in the book or not. So,
well, whenever it comes out, we are going to invite you back to have that conversation.
Absolutely.
With us here on Worship and Word.
Just let me be a small square at the bottom.
Dr. J, you want to talk about real quick? You want to share with the folks? Because by the time we see your degree will be conferred.
Yeah. The book that I wrote a few years ago, I titled it Sexuology, God, Gender, and Intimacy. And it's basically my exposition on Genesis 1-3, trying to understand the meaning and the purpose and the beauty of God creating mankind in his image. That's what it is, Genesis 1-3.
Okay. It's
an ebook and it's on Amazon.
Okay. So I will put that in the comment section, the link to that. Even if the broadcast is over, I'm going to put the link to that in the comment section. We'll keep you on Worship and Word. We'll let you know when Dr. Said's book comes out. We'll do a debut sort of thing to celebrate him and his work and keep you informed. So take care, folks. We'll see you next time.